So what are we gonna do with?
Okay. Why do we eat? Why do we eat? Zoe, why do we eat?
To survive.
Because you're hungry. What gives us that desire? What do it's to survive, and what do we get from our food?
Nutrients.
We get nutrients for like building up our body cells and tissues, etc.
Exactly.
Right? Is that it? Is that the only thing you get when we talk about how many calories are in a sample of food? Bless you. What is that? What are we saying about that food? What's that measurement? Energy. That's the energy, right? Calories is an energy unit. It's the amount of energy necessary to raise 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. It's totally physical, constant, not a constant, but a totally physical calculation. Has nothing to do with, well, directly, doesn't have anything to do with how fattening something is or something like that. It does, of course, end up having an influence on that, but that's really calories. And when they determine, when they look at the calorie content of food, they burn it. They put it in like a can, they call it a calorimeter, and put some oxygen in there, and they burn it completely and see how much temperature change occurs from that. And that's how they come up with a calorie rating for food.
That's cool.
So that's what we get from our food. These are the basic parts of the universe. We're going to ignore for now dark energy and dark matter because I have no idea what those things are, and apparently they're most of the universe. But for what we can observe, right? Huh?
We have dark matter in our brains.
I guess so. For what we can observe and everything, the observable universe is primarily matter and energy. And that's the matters of stuff, and energy's ability to move that stuff around, make things happen with it. So that's what we get from our food. That's what's necessary. It flows through the ecosystem through what we call a food chain. Chain of food. And each one of the steps along the food chain is known as a trophic level. Troph, you may remember from biology, perhaps heterotrophs, autotrophs, chemotrophs. Anybody remember those terms, perhaps? Basically, troph means eat. But each level on there, you have producers at one trophic level. Above that is consumers at another trophic level, and so on. Okay, so producers, what they're able to do, miraculously, I like to say, because of the fact that they do something that does not normally occur in the universe. As a matter of fact, it's something that kind of runs counter to the second law of thermodynamics. Now, it doesn't technically. You can balance out the budgets and actually comes out to behave in the laws of the universe. But it's a really unique and rare thing, and you could argue that without the presence of enzymes, that it wouldn't, none of this stuff would occur, and the enzymes would not exist if it weren't living things to produce them, etc. So you get kind of in a conundrum of trying to figure out which came first kind of thing, chicken or the egg type thing. But anyway, what producers do is they take simple compounds, carbon dioxide and water, and use energy from the sun and produce more complex molecules, in particular glucose at the beginning. Okay, glucose is a more complex molecule, molecular combination of carbon dioxide and water. That doesn't normally happen. Things don't usually get built. Things tend to fall apart, is what the second law of thermodynamics is. And that's why I said it's kind of runs a little counter to that. That is, of course, the process of photosynthesis. And it's a very good thing that happens. We've talked about before how the oxygen is actually a byproduct. Oxygen doesn't serve a function for the producers. They don't even use the oxygen that they produce when they do need to use oxygen when they respire. We'll talk about plant respiration in a minute. But that is not actually, it's considered to be a byproduct of the process of photosynthesis, although it's, of course, good for us. The plants then do that. They take that, they make glucose primarily, but then, of course, from there they make all kinds of other stuff. So you've got your sugars and carbohydrates. Glucose, of course, is one of those. Some of them will take it and knock off a carbon and rearrange it and form fructose. That's what's going to be in your fruit sugar. The main thing the plants do with this glucose is they take one unit of glucose, flip another one around, lock them together, and form cellulose, the most common biological molecule on the face of the earth. Because this is what trees and grass and plants and all the plant fiber and tissue is all made out of cellulose. And it's actually not even digestible by most vertebrate organisms. So that's another thing to do with it. Then they'll take and make things like proteins and lipids and other things, kind of things that not only have carbon and hydrogen in them and oxygen, but they also have iron and calcium and phosphorus and sulfur and those kind of things. And where do they get those from? Those elements. From plants. Where would they get those minerals? And from the soil. From the soil, or if they're an aquatic plant, they would get them from being dissolved in the water. And this is a part of what's called assimilation. We'll use that term later, go into more detail about it. But it's what plants do. They build molecules. They build biological molecules here. Okay. And you're probably hopefully pretty familiar with the rest of the food chain. You've got things that mainly eat the plants. Those are what we call herbivores, also known as primary consumers, which are then, of course, eaten by carnivores. And then you have some consumers that eat a large amount, at least, or a fair part of their diet is carnivores, and that makes them what we call a tertiary consumer. How about us? Where are we in this lineup? Are we tertiary consumers? Top of the food chain? Humans, right? All right. Yeah, how many of you had snake for breakfast? Anybody? I didn't. Really. No snake eaters. How about a nice cat bacon? You know, cut the strips of belly fat off the cat and eat the cat bacon. Nobody? No. Huh? Because that would make us a tertiary consumer. Except for fish, we tend to not eat carnivores. Either they just don't taste good, or too tough, or gamey, or whatever. But we don't tend to eat those. We tend to eat mainly herbivores, cows, chickens. Pigs are omnivores, but pigs that we eat mostly grains, eat mostly corn and stuff.
Chickens, are they omnivores?
They're omnivores. One thing is that these are not strict categories. They, a lot of these will cheat, so to speak. Chickens, the ones that we eat, Justin, are fed primarily a corn diet, just like the pigs that we eat typically are too. Although some of them, at least the chickens, I think sometimes they'll let, if they're free-ranging chickens, so they might be able to get bugs and worms and stuff. But most of what they eat is corn, is grain. Okay. So anyway, we tend to eat we tend to be actually secondary consumers. Actually, in the industrialized world, we tend to be mainly secondary consumers. And the developing nations, of course, are mostly primary consumers. They're mainly grain-based diet, that kind of thing. And we talked about how this affects environmental impact in agriculture and stuff like that, our dietary habits. So let's move on to the next and final one. In some respects, one of the most important parts of the ecosystem that do the dirty work is your decomposers. Okay. Now, I do not want you to confuse these with what are known as detritivores or scavengers. For example, worms are not decomposers, and vultures are definitely not decomposers. Okay, worms and vultures poop. Okay, you want to write that down?
Fungi.
Yeah, fun guys. They're we love those fun guys. Yeah, and girls. Fungi, and what's the other one? Bacteria. These are your decomposers. When they poop salt. They give off, they excrete minerals and stuff. And the organic part of it, they break down into carbon dioxide and water vapor. So they actually get these minerals. Now the plants, you may remember, I talked about this when we talked about wastewater, as a matter of fact. Plants cannot absorb organic molecules. You can't put a plant on a piece of meat and expect it to grow. But if you allow that meat to be decomposed by decomposers, like it would in the soil, then those decomposers will give off your minerals, your calcium, iron, sulfur, phosphorus, that kind of stuff. Nitrogen is more, yeah, you'll get some nitrogen byproducts there as well. But a lot of nitrogen is actually supplied by bacteria. So decomposers are crucial. This is the part where I always say we co-opt nature, or we go around it. And co-op's not the right word. We go against the laws of nature by taking our waste products and shipping them off somewhere else in our sewage systems and stuff, and by burying sealing up our dead people and burying them and keeping them out of the soil and stuff like that. That's where I say, if you want to serve the environment, go poop in an orange grove or drop granny off in a in a cow in a corn pasture or something.
Yeah.
Cornfield. Yeah. So, but don't call me from jail sometime and say, Mr. Campbell, I took your advice and I got arrested. It's not going to stand up in
We're
court.
not allowed to do that.
I will forget who you were at that point. So what? Keith,
You're not
you
allowed to
can't.
do that. You can't.
You know, you can't call and say, Mr. Campbell, I got busted
No,
for
I'm
pooping
saying
in a.
like, if I died, I could just tell my family to bury me underneath a tree.
Unfortunately, that's illegal.
That's illegal.
It's illegal.
You can donate to
Yeah.
science.
There are very, yeah, you can donate to science, but no, they're very specific because the disease organism stuff. I mean, if the person has disease or just they're having a big rotting flesh, but in pretty much, as far as I know, all areas they have strict regulations about what you can do with dead bodies. So, all right, moving on.
That's weird.
One of the factors and one of the things that you can measure within an ecosystem is its productivity. It is basically just the rate of photosynthesis that is going on.
Fire gone.
Well, I could do an area too. That's not too bad.
And photosynthesis, of course, is done by what kind of organisms?
Producers.
Producers, so that's where we get the productivity, producers' productivity, okay, of that ecosystem, all right? And one of the things that happens there, this is where ecologists subtract out part of it to they'll usually use net net primary productivity to rate, so to speak, an ecosystem, because the plants have to use some of that glucose they form. Plants also respire. I mentioned this before. I've talked about how you can drown a plant. If you overwater your plant, it's because you drowned it because it needs to absorb some air into its roots. Usually, that's where terrestrial type plants absorb their oxygen, and they need to do that because they carry out respiration as well. They have energy needs, and even though they produce energy-holding molecules in the glucose, at times they will break down that glucose and use it themselves. I don't know why the system doesn't go straight to doing the work for it, but I don't question nature. Their stuff she makes is usually pretty good. So we call that the net primary productivity. So you take the gross primary productivity, which is how much photosynthesis is going on, how much the plants are doing in a square meter, for example, and then subtract out the amount of that ends up being used by the plant and therefore going right back out into the atmosphere, and we call that our net primary productivity, or NPP would be what that would be. Any questions? Okay.